The FIRE movement is alive and well, and here to talk about it is Jason Hull, who has perhaps proof positive that the FIRE movement is alive and well. Jason, welcome, and
Hey, thanks for
eager to
having
hear
me.
more. So
Thanks
before
for
we get
having me.
going about FIRE, just a question for for the benefit of our viewers who may not be familiar with you and your work. Do you mind giving us a brief overview, a bit about your background?
Sure. So I am a certified financial planner still, even though I'm retired. I'm a West Point graduate and served in the Army for 5 years, went to business school, started a company, was fortunate enough to be able to sell it, did some financial planning for a while, which is why I'm a certified financial planner, and started a private equity fund with a fellow business school alumnus. And now, so we retired. My wife and I retired. I was 46. She was 45. I guess you could call it semi-retired because I'm still on some boards of some of the companies that our fund is invested in. But by and large, every day, my day now consists of walking the dog, reading, working out, taking a nap, and then doing whatever fun, shiny object kind of captures my eye and my attention.
So I should, obviously for folks who, I said the word FIRE, it stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. When did you decide that you wanted to do Financial Independence, Retire Early?
So I think that there were kind of a couple of points in my life where this became salient. So first was when I got out of the Army. So I'd been in the Army for 5 years. Had I stayed in another 15, and assuming that I made it that far and wasn't killed in a war or training accident or something like that, I would have probably retired as a lieutenant colonel and had a certain amount of pension income for the rest of my life. I would have had TRICARE medical coverage, could have had free MAC flights, military air command flights. So there was value to that, right? Besides the sacrifice of another 15 years, which thank God lots of people were willing to do. I'm very grateful for that. So to me, when I left the Army, my goal was, hey, by the time I would have hit retirement at age 42, I need to be at least as well off financially as I would have been. Mm-hmm. And then probably I really started thinking about part of it was the financial independence part, which was very much born on the back of reading Dave Ramsey and Clark Howard. I don't agree with everything that Dave Ramsey says. I wrote a very in-depth article about that on my website, but by and large, a lot of his principles I do agree with. And so I was very focused on making sure that we were out of debt, that we had the freedom and the flexibility to do what we wanted. I was able to start my company kind of as a result of the fact that we had been somewhat wise with how we dealt with our finances, to give myself the runway, because I didn't get paid for the first 18 months when I started my software company. So that was always something that was kind of on my mind. My wife and I, being the nerds and geeks that we are, our idea of a hot date on Friday nights was going and sitting in Barnes and Noble and reading books. So I read The Total Money Makeover. I read Financial Peace. I read Get Clark Smart. I also read, and this is where kind of the other part of the wheel started turning. I read The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of got the hamster running in the wheel, especially since I was running a software company. And then the Retire Early probably really started the first time I got an offer on my company. So, it was just a chance encounter with someone who could potentially be a strategic buyer. And so we went down the sales process, and I started thinking, okay, if we sell it, I know the number, I know what the company's worth. This gets us this. It's not FU money, and I know this is a family show, so I won't go any further. But it would be enough to where if we decided that we didn't want to work again, we could retire early. And so my wife and I went through the exercise of, okay, well, what do we want to do? What does our lifestyle look like? What do we want to be when we grow up? And we decided that we weren't ready at that point to cash our chips in, because we were 35 and 34 at that point. Maybe a little bit older. Once you get up in numbers, subtraction becomes more difficult. So that kind of became the goal, though, of, okay, we know that we could do a more scaled back version of retirement. We could cut our expenses and live in a way that we never had to go work again. So I always call that, you'll never have to dive in a dumpster to find your next meal. You're always going to have a roof over your head. That's true financial independence. And that gives you a lot of flexibility. But the retire early, I felt like I had another run in me. I felt like that there were some things I didn't accomplish with my software company that maybe I wanted to take another run and see what happened. So I started whole financial planning, which is how you and I first got engaged. I started my financial answers, which is still running as kind of an employee benefit tool for financial planning, and then wound up co-founding a private equity group with a fellow alumnus. And at that point, by that time, we were starting to think, this was 3.5 years ago at this point, we were starting to think, okay, we know that we're starting to get ready. And so I told him from the beginning, you've got 3 years. You got me for 3 years. And then after that, I'm pulling the ripcord, I'm pulling the parachute, and going to go do something else. But really, I think the retire early really started with reading the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, and then being fortunate enough to sell my company as a forcing function of like, oh, hey, what do you want to do? But, and that's not to say that that's the path that you have to go down. Most business owners are not Mark Zuckerberg or whoever the guy was that did Instagram in his garage and sold it for $1 billion. Most small business owners, if they're successful, they're paying themselves a salary. Maybe they're putting a little bit more aside. But look, I could have kept a job. I could have gone and been a consultant or ops manager or fill in the blank. Busker, played the violin on the street corner. And I probably financially would have wound up in the same place that I was at the time that I sold the company. Like I said, I did not get FU money. I got enough to get to financial independence. But I think if I would have stayed employed in corporate America and been wise and been aggressive and been thoughtful, I would have been at that same decision point anyway. So this isn't a discussion about the only path is being a small business owner or an entrepreneur or startup guy or gal, but rather what are the things you think about along the way as you get to certain milestones, of which financial independence is one. And then I would dissociate the two decisions. Financial independence and retire early are two separate decisions that require two separate types of thought processes.
Yeah. So just a question, obviously, you mentioned this a second ago, but you had the luxury of being a small business owner, which gave you the ability to have a liquidity event. Some people who have adopted the FIRE movement are working in corporate America or working in a gig economy.
Yep.
And for them, sometimes there's something that they have to give up, right? I've been told that some of the folks who have adopted FIRE are living so far below their means, right? Saving 50% of their income and denying themselves the simple and extravagant pleasures, I suppose, of life, but all in the desire to sock away as much money as possible in as quick a time as possible so that they can not only gain financial independence, but retire early.
Right.
In your case, it sounds like you may not have had to give up as much as some of those other folks did in terms of scaling back living expenses.
Right. Yeah. I think we lived the life that we wanted to live. We're not materialists. I drive the putative granny car, which is a 2005 Toyota Avalon with 75,000 miles. So but we travel quite a bit. We've been to dozens of countries. We went to the World Cup in South Africa. We went to the Women's World Cup in Canada. So we've had great experiences. So,
and that's sort of atypical too of the generation that wants to adopt FIRE, right? That they value experiences more than material items.
Yeah, and I'm going to butcher his name. So Mikhaili Csikszentmihalyi, he did the research on flow. He also did research on which gives you higher pleasure and higher joy and eudaimonia, things or experiences. And the only time that things gave you a high amount of happiness was when the things were associated with experiences. Right. And so I'm very much a fan of that. I have a friend who says I collect friends and experiences. I collect friends, experiences, and lint. So I'm very much a fan of living to experience things. And I think that was part driven by being stationed overseas. So I was stationed in Germany. I had a very different experience. I kind of caught the expat bug. I caught the travel bug. I tried to go to at least all the neighboring countries. I have some memories. I have some blank spaces about Oktoberfest. So, I really enjoyed my time. And so and look, when I was a first lieutenant, I had the brand new convertible BMW 328i car and a pertinent car payment. So I've experienced both ends of that. And, the car I'll tell the stories about the car like I tell the stories about the travel.
Right.
And so I was fortunate enough to be able to have that experience at a young age. And I think that shaped how I wanted to live my life. And yeah, I mean, we still live below our means, but we were not, I wasn't Pete, Mr. Money Mustache. I wasn't Jacob at early retirement extreme. I think we were probably saving in the beginning, probably 20 to 25%. As we started accumulating, that became closer to 50%. I know we put away all of our rental income and reinvested that in rental properties. So we held the line. We didn't jump on the hedonic treadmill in terms of lifestyle, but I would not classify our lifestyle as a particularly frugal lifestyle. We're not vacationing in the Hamptons. I don't have my driver driving up in my Rolls to take me to the grocery store.
With your private jet and whatnot,
yeah. Take me in my private jet to go to the island to go pick fresh pineapple for dinner. I'm not doing that. But I wouldn't say that we deprived ourselves. And that was part of that. When I talked about, we were at the point that we could be financially independent if we dialed back some things. We made the intentional choice and said, this is not what we want to do. We enjoy this lifestyle. And so it's worth it to just let the magic of compounding work in our favor for a few more years until we are at that point. And then, we'll make a decision. Like if you love what you do, and that's what you would do if you were retired, there's no point in retiring. But I would argue most people, if you ask them a series of whys, why do you do this? Why do you do this? Why do you do this? The core of who they are is not defined by what they do. Right. And so once you discover that, then again, you dissociate who you are from what you do, and you work towards being able to spend the time to do what you want. And look, I understand the drive to retire as early as possible because time is not fungible. If you were to have shown up to this to this discussion 5 minutes early and I wasn't there, you can't get that back later on. Right. You can't bank that time. So time's not fungible, and time is a depreciating asset. So you're given so many years on the planet. You could do some things, diet and exercise to try and extend it, but you're only given so many years. And so you want to spend as many of those years as possible doing the things that provide meaning to you. So I get the drive, but you also don't want to be so focused on that you're spending 60 years in misery or unhappiness and going, hey, I'm eating rice cakes every day. I don't have to go into work, but boy, I'm eating rice cakes every day and that sucks.
Right.
That's not the, that's not the life that you want. So there's a balance in deciding when to retire. And, I don't know that we struck it right, but I think we were plus or minus a couple of years right in terms of going through. We really talked about, okay, what do we want to do in retirement? Who do we want to be? How do we want to spend our time? Which a lot of that is an exercise in hot, cold empathy gap, which is, I think I'm going to do something. And then when you're actually in the moment, you may do something completely different. But we definitely went through the exercises of self-discovery to try and really tease out what it was that we wanted to do in retirement, so that we knew that we would be able to financially support that, or, plus or minus. You're never perfect in your forecasting, so you got to go to good enough and then
Right. So
adapt from there.
that raises an interesting point. I think obviously if there has to be a magic bullet around making FIRE work, it's doing the analysis, the self-discovery to say, how will I spend my time? But equally important, and I think this is where I sometimes get hung up on FIRE, I find it so interesting that people say, well, but in the traditional world, I'm going to work till 65 and I need money that will last 35 years of retirement. For someone who is adopting FIRE and retires in their mid-30s, now they have to fund 60 years of retirement. And that's an awfully long time to fund something for which there are so many risks and so many unknowns and so many uncertainties. So I guess I think the FIRE folks can certainly get what they want to do in retirement right. Getting the money right seems like a much more difficult task given how difficult it is just to fund 30 years of retirement.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I would argue that some of these people that have fired and are lean FIRE are taking unnecessary risks. And they will find that, and I'm willing to bet that the median event is a health shock.
Right.
That will cause them to go, oh, well, I had $1 million that was supposed to support $40,000 a year. And oh crap, I have $250,000 worth of cancer expenses. And they were living lean at $40,000 a year. So that's where that balance, you got to get the balance right. And you have to, and look, the coronavirus pandemic is a perfect example. You have to plan for a fat tail outcome. So I'm very much a fan of Nassim Taleb's Anti-Fragile and all of his books.
Yep.
And the main point of Anti-Fragile is that you have to be able to not only survive but thrive during a low probability but high impact event.
Right.
Yeah. And we're seeing that in the coronavirus, right? That people. I think I read a study that Fidelity said that some crazy percentage, like 34% of all of their 401k participants between ages 61 and 65 sold everything between February and May. And so they sold at the bottom,
right.
Which is a 25% haircut off of your nest egg right there, which is just painful. And so the equivalent, the lean FIRE equivalent in my mind is a horrific health event, or you get hit by a car, or some really negative event that you probably don't think is going to happen to you, just like no one ever thinks that the tornado is going to hit their house. But the moment the tornado hits your house, if you don't have insurance, you're in a world of hurt. So that to me is where I think the lean FIRE people may be accepting too much risk, because the mentality is, and generally speaking, rightly so, I can go back to work.
Right. That's your
I find
emergency plan. Right.
My break glass is go back to work. Well, if you have a health scare, you may not be able to go back to work. Now, what are you going to do? You still got that same amount of time to cover, and you're unable to go back to work. Your expenses may go up, right? If you need some sort of long-term type of care, and you've whacked your nest egg significantly. So that was something that we made sure we actually talked through. Like, we had 13 different fallbacks before get a job was one of our answers, to make sure that we were not in that position. So I think it does take, it takes more thought and planning. And look, if you're going for a 50 or a 60 year retirement, your safe withdrawal rate is probably more like 3.4%, not 4%. And even then, welcome to the pandemic. So, so I think you have to do a little bit more intellectual rigor around your planning and determining, how do I deal with a fat tail event that could be very negative to me, and make sure that I'm anti-fragile to it before you pull the plug. I think a lot of people are saying, oh, 4% safe withdrawal rate, I can retire, and I'm making it work at $30,000 a year. It's not a risk, obviously, given when we retired. It's not a risk that we were willing to accept.
Yeah.
And I'm a risk seeker, right? I'm an entrepreneur. So I'm by definition a risk seeker.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that you've gone through an extraordinarily thorough process. Do you think most of the folks who are in the FIRE movement have gone through the exercises, the reading, the planning that you have, or do you find that they're just sort of aspiring for this? And
I think some have and some haven't. I'll give you a really good example of someone who I think has, is Jeremy and Winnie at Go Curry Cracker. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Great blog, very thoughtful. They did it right, and they retired. I think Jeremy was 38 when they retired. They've got their second kid on the way. They're doing it right. I won't go the other way.
Yeah.
But there are people who do, and I think it helps to get a second set of eyes. So go, don't call me, but go to a hourly fee only certified financial planner and get a sanity check. What am I missing here? What holes have I failed to fill in this plan? Or else, do I check all these boxes and I pass go and I collect $200 and I retire? I would hate to not be educated enough to make that decision. Make the decision without having someone who is educated enough to make the decision to be the eyes over my shoulder. It's not even measure twice, cut once. It's measure 4 or 5 times, cut once, because I can already tell you 6 months into retirement, the price of what it would take to get me to go back to work exponentially grows over time. And there is an adaptation to that. And I might not be the common FIRE person in terms of willingness to go back to it. But I do think that a lot of people, once they stop working and figure out ways to fill their day, will say, I never knew how I had a job in the first place, and would not want to go back. And so you don't want to put yourself in that psychological hole either. So it's not just a monetary hole, it's a psychological hole of, think of like lottery winners, the people that are lottery winners and then blow all their money.
Right.
Like how miserable psychologically they have to be. And suicide rates are much higher amongst lottery winners as a result. Right. And so there is a real risk that if you got it wrong, it's not just financial, it's the, I had the ring and I lost it. Having to deal with that mentally, and that you got to be made of some tougher stuff than I am to go through that.
So it's interesting as you're listening to you talk, not that you want to go back to work, but there's certainly a book that you could write about how to do FIRE right and what mistakes to avoid.
Which I would never write. That would take way too much time. I could have you ghostwrite it for me.
Yeah, and we can spend 10 minutes on a video talking about it too.
Exactly. You just give them the link to this video, and they're good to go.
Version. Yeah. So in terms of what you plan to do in your retirement, that you mentioned some things. I recall talking to some folks who have retired in the past, and they were very specific. I'm going to spend time with my grandchildren, in my garden, traveling, reading books I never read, and they had mapped it out. It wasn't just going to be golf. Have you mapped it out?
I'm not a golfer.
Yeah.
And golf courses, local golf courses are very thankful that they don't have to double their landscaping.
Yeah, I've been banned from many golf courses. I know the feeling.
I'm really good at making divots, and I could do the Happy Gilmore, where you run up and you smack it. I can do that. And that the golf pros were jaws dropped when I was doing that.
Yeah.
So we do know that we enjoy travel, that we enjoy experiencing new cultures. I've been doing a lot of Duolingo, trying to get to beyond restaurant level Spanish. Yo quiero una cerveza. I've expanded beyond that. And our dog, we have a almost 14-year-old Greyhound mix, and so we wanted to make sure that we could spend time with him and do lots of long walks with him. But then the coronavirus pandemic hit and has, at least for the interim term, changed kind of our focus. So so now, what do? We still walk the dog 2 hours a day, still work out an hour a day. We do a lot of reading. I'm very much an autodidact, so I like learning about things. As you can tell, we have family members who have COVID, and I think that is partially due to here in Texas, a lot of people don't wear masks. 38% of men say that they never wear masks, and over 50% of them say it's because they feel like they lose a sense of masculinity. So we figured we'd try and, I've never done anything like this, so I figured it'd be kind of cool to try and create a little product to try and encourage people in a more positive way to do the right thing. Something like 68% of people have unprotected sex at least once. Right. The condom usage is the #1 preventer of transmissible diseases. And in the 80s, they were having a terrible time trying to convince people to use condoms to prevent disease. And so, trying to come up with positive messages for the benefits. It's something that's meaningful to me because we see how it has affected our family members who have COVID. Right. And I don't want to be and sometimes I slip, but I don't want to be the one that's like, wear a freaking mask. Right. So
you'll end up on YouTube or Instagram.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to be, probably not for the right reasons. And then the other thing, we're nowhere near being as educated as we could be, but we are very aware that we are where we are, at least somewhat as a result of white privilege. And so trying to get involved and understand the Black Lives Matter, understand how I as a white male can help contribute to that in a meaningful way and be an ally, and how there are a lot of things that we just were completely unaware of in our lives because of how we were raised, that if I had a different perspective would be a completely different experience. So I'll give you an example. So 2 days ago, we went to a local college campus to walk our dog because it's nice and wide open, big sidewalks, easy to social distance. And because school's not in session, I may or may not have parked illegally in a spot where 7 to 5, you're supposed to have a little sticker. I don't have the sticker. So we come back, we're bringing the dog, putting the dog in the car, and a policeman drives up. And he drives up really slow, window down. And to me, that kind of, I had the dawning awareness, like I was completely unperturbed by this. Right. And all he wanted to do was talk about how cute my dog was. Right. And that he had an older dog. And we were talking about having to take him in wagons and what would we do if he saw a squirrel. If I was a Black person, I might be very cautious about that. And I didn't get a ticket. He just wanted to talk about the dog. I didn't even think anything of it. But if I was a Black person, I may have had I may have had the exact same experience. That policeman may have treated me Black Jason Hole the exact same way, but Black Jason Hole probably would have thought differently about that police officer in a way that white Jason Hole didn't have to.
Right.
So, finding things that help me be a part of a community. So, I mentioned the 4-hour work week. One of the things that Tim Ferriss talked about in that book is the people that have massive exit events in their 20s. I founded Instagram, or I founded whatever, and they have an exit and they no longer work. How do they find happiness? And the number one driver of happiness was engagement within a community.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you don't work, when you don't have employees or a team or customers or peers in your industry or whatever to talk to, when you're retired, there aren't many people where we live who are 40-somethings retired.
Right.
There aren't many people anywhere who are 40-somethings retired. So finding, if we can't find a peer group, then what are the ways that we can stay engaged? And we can't just call up. And this was a pre-coronavirus or post vaccine world. We can't just call up a friend, be like, "Hey, it's Thursday at 10 a.m. Let's go grab a coffee." They're going to be like, "You bleep 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 bleep. You're retired. I'm working." And so, finding ways to stay engaged and to stay connected. We had planned on doing that through travel, through immersion language training, doing slow travel where you stay a month to 3 months in a location, really get to know the people, the lifestyle, get to practice something more than "I want a beer" in the local language.
Yeah.
That was how we were going to do it. And since that has been temporarily put on hold, we have to find other ways to be engaged with people, because otherwise you wind up, it's very easy, and it's the fast lane to an early grave, is sit in front of the TV and blow through your entire Netflix queue and not be active, not be connected, not be mentally engaged.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground, obviously, here. Anything that we haven't touched upon that you think we should, or?
So I do think it's important to know your why, for why you want to do this. Why do I want to be financially independent? Why do I want to retire early? And it's not just the superficial why. So in Six Sigma, you asked why 5 times in order to get to the root cause. It's called rigorous root cause analysis. So you do rigorous root cause analysis of asking why 5 times and really understanding and being aware, and while going through the process, being thankful, right? Gratitude improves your psychological well-being. It improves your longevity. And I think it also makes you less likely to be the "put a freaking mask on" type of angry person all the time. And so being present, being in the moment, being aware, having gratitude, I think that forces you into that deeper level of thinking that makes it harder to just say, "Oh, well, I'm going to live by this little rule of thumb and I'm going to make the decision." Because look, my life wasn't materially made better or made worse by not retiring this time last year, or instead of December 31st, 2019, December 31st, 2018. So now there is a boiling the frog, right? I could have worked another year. And so I think people are happier when they have positive goals to think of, when they have milestones that they can achieve. And then in retirement, retirees tend to have more happiness when they think of peace and contentment.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you set your goals while you're still working towards having peace and contentment when you're retired, I think that's the winning formula in terms of being able to stick to your plan and then being glad that you did what you did when you did it.
Yeah. So every answer begets another question. When you went through the process of asking 6 whys, did the why change from the first why to the last change to the last why?
Um, Probably the first why was I don't want to work for anyone anymore. Um, and that probably begat independence and control. And then a life that my time and my actions um, were focused on the things that were important to me. I'm sure there were a couple more
Sure.
iterations
Yeah.
of the
Yeah. Yeah.
why, but I certainly remember, and that was even why I started a company. Like, I don't want to work for anyone anymore, which is if you're an entrepreneur, you know the lie in that.
Yeah.
And one of the things, sorry, to go back to one of your other questions, one of the things that you asked about, what did I give up
Yeah.
in order to get here? And I became an entrepreneur. So I was an entrepreneur from 2005 till the end of 2019. I guess you could still say I'm kind of a quasi-entrepreneur. The thing that I think I gave up was freedom. So when I worked at Capital One, I drove home and I really didn't get random phone calls at 7 in the evening about stuff. I wasn't on weekend calls except for, I think, one time. As an entrepreneur, I put in more hours, and it took more of my mental bandwidth in the hours I wasn't working.
Right.
So not only did I have no paycheck, no vacation for 18 months, but even, I remember first world problems, riding on a ski lift, and having this thought of like, oh, crud, I need to, and trying to pull out my phone and not drop it off the ski lift while I'm like grabbing my glove, and I had to do payroll in Namibia when we went to the World Cup, and it didn't work. Like I'd done something wrong, and then my partners back in the US were like, what's happening with the paychecks? I'm like, we have no internet out in the middle of nowhere in Namibia. So the fact that even on vacations, I was never able to completely stop thinking about, you're always working on the business mentally.
Right.
And so, I mean, if I was a McKinsey consultant, I was probably working 80 hours a week, and I was gone 4.5 days a week. But the weekends were generally mine. And I was not a McKinsey consultant, but I know plenty of people who were. So there is some ability to cut it off if you choose to cut it off. Whereas even if you choose to cut it off, the back of your mind doesn't let you cut it off.
Right.
And so that's something that I think you have to be prepared for that trade-off. And it was something that I never, I guess they kind of try and teach you that in business school. And, if you don't go to business school, then, talking to other entrepreneurs, but until you're in it, it's sort of like the X's and the O's in the locker room versus actually going out in the field. And you're like, holy crap,
those X's hurt.
Yeah, exactly. That guy just punched me in the nose, and I'm seeing stars, and wait, why is this guy counting 10 in front of me? That was the trade-off for me.
But that trade-off is, it strikes me that it's a trade-off that entrepreneurs face, and you just happen to also be in a FIRE movement, and so the trade-off were aligned. But many entrepreneurs who aren't in FIRE experience that same kind of trade-off.
Right. Yeah, they do, and some of those don't even know how to get off the ride when they want to get off the ride.
Right.
I've talked to plenty of them. They're like, well, I can't leave. What will the business do without me? Which is probably another topic for another show.
Yeah, another time. So we talked about a couple things that you should do to pursue FIRE. What are the 1 or 2 or 3 things that you absolutely, positively must not do if you're trying to do FIRE and do it right?
To me, the must not is don't change who you are. Don't, and to me, I think of lean fire when I think of this, that I think some people are so focused on trying to get to the RE part that uh, they give up some of their core values, and they give up what's important to them, and they give up what brings them joy. Yeah, you can walk in parks, and parks are free, and you can go to the library, and the library is free. But there are some things that you're going to want to do that will bring you joy that cost money, and that's okay that they cost money. As long as you know that you're spending for something that gives you joy. Like I can't fly for free, no matter how many credit card hacks I do. I can't fly for free all the time in a post-vaccine world. It's going to cost me money. So I think if you're not true to who you are when you're designing your plan, then all you're doing is setting yourself up either for forced misery or for failure.
Yeah.
So again, there are numbers that are involved in all of this. I also think that you should never retire on a rule of thumb. Be it the bigger pockets 50% rule, be it the 4% safe withdrawal rate, whatever that rule of thumb is, you need to know how it applies to your specific situation, whether or not it's going to work. But I think a lot more of it is the psychological part of it, the values, the who you are. All that informs everything that you do, because if it doesn't align with your values, you're not going to stick to the plan anyway.
Yeah. So I'm always filled with more questions. It's a curse, I'm afraid.
The curse
of being inquisitive.
That's right.
So obviously you're married. To do FIRE and to be married or married with children, any advice there? I mean, obviously you can't do FIRE on your own if you're married, right?
Right. Yeah. No, if you quit and your spouse is banging away 100-hour weeks, then that's not a recipe for success unless you're a fabulous cook, a fabulous masseur, super handy around the house. I said that we listened to Dave Ramsey. So 1 year, Dave Ramsey gave veterans, for Veterans Day, Financial Peace University. You got Financial Peace University for a month.
Okay.
And my wife and I had sort of been on the same page, sort of not really on the same page. And so I asked her to do it with me and to listen and go through the exercises. And so I remember, we were playing it on the drives that we would make. And I think that's kind of what going through that process was what got us on the same page, like talking about all the things that Mr. Ramsey brought up in Financial Peace University. And it could be Financial Peace University. It could be something else. Yeah. But I think at some point you and your spouse need to have that discussion together of what do we want to do. And then there are going to be points at which what we want to do is not what I want to do. And so how do you square that? How do you do the things you want to do? How do you do the things your spouse wants to do when that doesn't necessarily, those two aren't the same thing? And are there trade-offs? Are there compromises? Or are these things that maybe you delay your retirement so that you can both achieve them? But I don't think that this is something, there will always be one person driving the train in terms of who's the motive force behind it. Someone is always going to be the one that puts the bit between their teeth and pulls. But if the other person isn't on the ride, then I think that's just that's a recipe for dissent down the road, unhappiness, fights. When one spouse goes, well, I didn't sign up for this, rice cake thing, and now we don't have a job, and I don't want rice cakes.
Right.
You have to go back to work to pay your alimony. That's if both of you aren't, you don't have to be 100% aligned with everything that you're going to do, but you better be aligned with what your end goal is.
Yeah.
And the summation, because it's never going to be one. We aren't all one, and so maybe I want an extra quarter, or maybe my spouse wants an extra quarter, to make the math easy, and so it's 1.5. And so that, to me, that's part of, like, we go through a budgeting exercise, and so we each have a separate pot of money that we get every single month that's ours to blow on whatever we want. So, like, this all comes out of my blow fund.
Okay.
And she buys things that make her look great, which, I just think, like, magic fairies appear and she looks great, but apparently there are all these products and bottles and stuff that I don't know what they are, and they just magically show up, and apparently they cost money. So I think you have to have that conversation. You can't just be the unilateral driving force. And if there's, if you two are going in skew lines, then that's probably some other signal that I'm not a marital counselor, but you probably need to talk to someone about, hey, my values go this way and my spouse's values go that way. What does this mean? And how do we get them together? I'm a big fan of therapy. So I'd rather have that type of discussion early and get it resolved than find myself in a situation where I'm planning on spending X every single year plus 3% inflation for the rest of my life, and finding out that my spouse was never really on board with that idea. Because that's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. So the other thing that comes up as I think about what you're talking about is this notion of behavioral finance, and the notion that some people are hardwired with present bias and some aren't. And do you think there's any correlation between those who have adopted the FIRE movement and their ability to value tomorrow's dollar greater than today's dollar?
I mean, there have to be. Anytime, think of the Stanford marshmallow test. If anytime you have a kid who is willing to wait 5 minutes to get 2 marshmallows, they were kind of shown to be more successful in the business world, or in the work world. So the fact that you're not immediately gratifying yourself with all the income that you have, and maybe even more, running up debt, shows that you have the ability to delay and defer gratification. So that is, now, I remember Mom told me this one time, which kind of struck home: don't delay gratification so much that you never actually get gratification.
Right.
So you have to have a balance of present happiness and future happiness. If you're living rice cake, and you're horrifically miserable, but by God, in 10 years, I'm going to be able to live this great life with, like, Patron and Dom and hot tubs full of champagne, then you're going to be so miserable by the time you get to that point that you won't be able to enjoy the Patron and the Dom and the champagne bathtub. So, yes, you obviously have to defer gratification. To me, that's, you hide the money from yourself. That's I put X% away right up front. I take it out of the paycheck. I reinvest dividends or whatever you're going to do, to not allow your limbic system to go, oh, look at that money. I can buy all sorts of cool things with this. And then with the rest of it, you spend on the things that are important to you. Ramit Sethi is very big on spending very luxuriantly on things that matter to you. So, I think it's not have your cake and eat it too, but you can have a slice.
Yeah. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. If you have any final words on the FIRE movement, I'm all ears. Otherwise, I'll thank you for sharing all your tips and knowledge.
To quote the great philosopher and former UFC champion Forrest Griffin, the juice is worth the squeeze.
Well, thanks ever so much, Jason. I do hope that some folks listen to your words of wisdom, and we get them on the path to retiring early and financial independence.
This is fun. It's worth it. Do it.
Great.